So we had a couple of years of real estate experience at that point. We knew, hey, sure, we got into this duplex, then we did a BRRRR, those things were all fine and dandy, and we learned, and that's not going to get us to where we need to be with both of us quitting our jobs. So we have to go to that next level. And it made sense at the time. We had that experience with mobile homes. We understood how mobile home parks worked, and we were ready to go bigger. So we just absorbed all the information we could about mobile home parks for about 6 months, and then spent the next 6 months trying to find one.
What is going on, guys? Today on the Collecting Keys Real Estate Investing podcast, we have Amanda Cruz, who is a super inspirational investor out of North Carolina that in a very short period of time went from buying residential properties to becoming a mobile home park and commercial investor. And she dropped some incredible knowledge on this show that's going to leave you thinking like, it's really that simple. What have I been doing if I'm looking to make that leap? Like, it's really not as hard as so many people make it sound.
No, you just have to put in the effort, like she talks about, putting in the effort, putting in the time, be willing to pay to get to places faster, joining masterminds and getting around people that know what they're doing. And I always think about this too, like when I'm like, oh, that's going to be hard to do. It's like, well, there's other people doing it, so I should be able to do it. It's just how do I get from me to them in as shortest period of time as possible?
Exactly. Yeah. And as we kind of get towards the end of the show, she starts to talk about like her general process for how she finds the leads and sort of like her entire business operation, what it looks like. And I mean, spoiler, it is surprisingly simple, but she does give you like literally the blueprint about how you can go and do exactly what she's doing. So, she scaled it very, very quickly. Super great listen. You guys should definitely reach out to her as well. She's more than happy to chat with people. That's why people come on these shows. They want to get exposure to other people. So don't be afraid to reach out to her. Let her know you found value. Let her know that you're looking to get some more information about what she does in the mobile home park space. And I'm sure she would have some incredible knowledge she'd be happy to share with you. So anyways, guys, enjoy the show. Please go and share it with anybody who has any interest in real estate investing, making money in general, or just wants to hear some about story from someone who's crushing it. Lots of, great motivational stuff there, regardless of what you're into. You can also go to collectingkeyspodcast.com/free, get our free 5-step guide to generate off-market leads. And then you can also start buying some higher class assets, just like Amanda does. Anyways, guys, really awesome episode today. Enjoy this episode with Amanda Cruz. All right, Amanda Cruz out of North Carolina. Super excited to have you on. You are a very highly referred person from Sarah Weaver, who we had on the show a few weeks ago, and really excited to hear your story and how you've gotten into all the stuff you're doing. So I guess people that don't know who you are, haven't heard about you before, give us the details, give us the lowdown, kind of where you started, what you're working on now, and everything in between.
Absolutely. So thanks, Mike and Dan, for having me. So my name is Amanda Cruz. I'm from North Carolina. I grew up pretty traditionally as far as jobs and work. My mom retired from a public school system, so I sort of followed the same trajectory of education. I got an undergrad in chemistry from NC State and then did nothing with that. I moved up to Washington, D.C. and started doing wargaming analysis for the Department of Defense. Got a master's in applied statistics while I was doing that, and then ended up hopping down to Richmond, Virginia, and joining Capital One, where I worked for about a decade. I was managing a team of analysts there. I loved it, super exciting, challenging. And I also realized through that I was working so hard for somebody else and not for myself and my own family. So eventually I ended up starting in real estate investing as a way to sort of see if I could make it on my own and make my own money. My husband and I started with a duplex. We fixed it up. We put tenants in place. We ended up selling that a few years later. We did a couple of, smaller things. In single family, we tried to gut one. We moved into that one. We did another BRRRR. Those were fine. They went well. We didn't love managing contractors, but we didn't lose our shirts on anything. And I'd heard from this investor who I really, really respect, Bill Cook, who's just an amazing deal structurer. He's really big into creative deal structuring. And so I'd heard from him, there's one deal that if somebody he really respected could do for the rest of their lives, and there was only one type, it would be a Lonnie deal, which is essentially you buy a mobile home, just like you do a single family home. You buy it from somebody who, really needs to sell, and you buy it for a good price, and then you turn around and sell it to some other family who's going to live there, and you carry the note, right? You're the bank. So we did a couple of those. They went really well. Those notes are at 18% interest. So, that worked out, and we wanted to do more of that. So we ended up getting into mobile home parks. We did that in 2020, and we have a handful of parks now, and have just really embraced commercial real estate and sort of haven't looked back to residential.
Yeah,
fantastic.
I love that. So what's the time domain of that, I guess, from when you, I guess, started to now you're buying mobile home parks in 2020, which was probably one of the toughest times to start buying mobile home parks, because Brandon Turner had already spilled the beans on Bigger Pockets, and everyone was chasing him at that point. So I guess what's all the steps in, like, the timeline in the middle there?
2018 is when we bought our first duplex.
Wow.
2020, we bought our first mobile home park. So funny story, that was actually a really good time at the beginning of the year. And so people had started talking about them, but it was pre-COVID craziness that happened with all real estate. So anybody who bought something prior to that, you're so thankful that you did, right? And we closed on ours the first week of April 2020. So we went under contract in January before the world changed and closed in the middle of the pandemic. Like, it was terrifying. It was the biggest purchase we'd ever made. I underwrote it like 50 or 100 times, but it made sense. Like 50% of the people would have to not pay for us to not be able to make our mortgage payments. Like, the fundamentals made sense, and we did it, and we haven't looked back. So I would say now is a much harder time to buy mobile home parks than 2020.
Right.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I got a question before because I know you're here to talk about real estate, but what does wargaming analysis look like? Like, what are you all doing down there in Washington, D.C.?
Oh, I always said it was like the most boring video game you've ever played.
Really?
Yeah. So we were basically trying to understand in a war scenario how certain aspects would go down, or, there were certain scenarios we'd play out. Obviously it was classified, but we were trying to understand different pieces and what was likely to happen. And we run all these different scenarios.
Is it kind of like doing like game theory? Like, hey, if this person does this, then we would expect a logical person.
Not psychological. It was more like Monte Carlo simulations.
Oh, okay.
And so it people would think it sounded really, really cool, but it was the slowest, most boring video game you've ever seen actually play out.
Got it.
That's funny. So Dan's actually been to war, so it'd be interesting to see
what the analysis said versus what actually happens. That's actually really funny. Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So we worked with a lot of guys who had retired from the military, and then they would come over and they would see our analysis, and they would just be like, it was a very good dynamic to have both minds there for sure.
Funny. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's something that's infinitely unpredictable. But no, that's interesting though, because like I bet that experience probably teed you up for real estate pretty well, right? Because you already had that mindset to do the deep analysis and to think of all the potential black swan things, right? That was part of your job. And even though they're not directly related, I mean, the skill sets are slightly parallel.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like you see a lot of engineers in real estate, right? Like, it's the analytical background. Like, yeah, that is my brain. Like, that's how I work. So that worked out really well. And then being at Capital One, I was managing a team of data analysts in the finance part.
Oh, okay.
So I really got to understand balance sheet and income statement and all the different pieces of that, which was also really helpful in now running our business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So yeah, we're engineering background.
Yeah.
I mean, and you're right. It is there's always two kinds of people that I feel like do really well in this business. And they're people that are really good at the analytical side of it, or the people that are really good at the sales side of it. And, you find two people that are both, good at those, and they partner up. That's when like really successful businesses come together. Right.
Yeah.
So no, that's cool. So you started investing in, this real estate, 2018. Were you still working your W-2? I guess, do you still work your W-2, or are you full-time real estate now?
I'm full-time real estate now. I left my W-2 in 2022.
Oh, great.
Nice. Good for you. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah. So as you started to make that leap into real estate, how did you balance all of that? That's always kind of one of the biggest questions people ask, especially because you were doing renovations. It wasn't like you were buying turnkey properties. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into that, as anybody who's dabbled in this business knows.
Yeah, it was very stressful for years. We also had two children, or one when we first started. So, anybody who is really, really smart would get into real estate prior to having children, not when they have a 1-year-old. That's not what our path took us on. So we just made it work. And it was a lot of hours, and it was working in the evenings and on weekends. Now, we got lucky in 2019. My husband got laid off from his IT job. And I was like, do not go get another IT job. We know we want to do this thing. Yeah. Like, I was always supposed to be the one that left first. Like, real estate was my thing. Like, okay, we otherwise would never have quit our jobs. Like, one of us would not have quit our jobs then. We only had a couple of properties, but it worked out. And so he could be the one to go manage the contractors at that point and, find the mobile home parks and manage those.
Yeah, that's helpful. A little push, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, that's great balance. And I appreciate you, just being honest about that too, that it is a lot of work. And that's something that a lot of people tend to try to skip over, but that's part of the gig, right? And so, Dan and I's story, we were doing real estate individually on our own until we started partying up in 2020. And now we have this big off market business. We've done hundreds of deals over the past 3 years. We make pretty decent money with our business doing this whole thing. And people are always like, I feel like you did that so fast. I'm like, well, you don't see the part where we work 14 hours a day for 2.5 years.
Yeah, the
right?
grinding it out, and the hustling, and the right. Getting it done quietly, and then all of a sudden, then it pays off.
Exactly.
That's right.
It's funny. And you can use leverage, you can use team members, all that sort of stuff, but you're gonna have to put that work in eventually. Mm-hmm. So that's awesome. So then, I guess, to make the leap to mobile home parks, you first started buying these mobile homes and selling them on rental and options, right? But or were they written, or did they seller finance? I guess, how would that normally
seller work? Finance? Yeah, they'd give us a down payment and we just held on to the note.
Cool. So you were completely off title at that point, and they were the full owner of it.
Yep.
But from that jump to a mobile home park, I mean, that's a pretty big jump, right? I guess, unless they're really small parks, because that's like saying, I own a house, I'm going to own a neighborhood. It's like right. A big step up very, very quickly. It
was, and it wasn't. So we had a couple of years of real estate experience at that point. We knew, hey, sure, we got into this duplex, then we did a BRRRR, those things were all fine and dandy, and we learned, and that's not going to get us to where we need to be with both of us quitting our jobs. So we have to go to that next level. And it made sense at the time. We had that experience with mobile homes. We understood how mobile home parks worked, and we were ready to go bigger. So we just absorbed all the information we could about mobile home parks for about 6 months, and then spent the next 6 months trying to find one. And our first park was a 50-lot park. So we didn't necessarily buy the small one next, which is another reason we were absolutely terrified. But ultimately, we knew it was the right thing.
So this, Mike and I, this is our business, right? We search out and find deals before they are on the market. How do you find deals, and how did you find that first one? Because that is the biggest hiccup for people to start anything, is how do you find it?
So we did the same. We have our parks are off market, direct to seller. That's a lot more competitive than it used to be. Now, I didn't put the time into the broker relationships in the mobile home park space that I should have initially. And also back in 2020 and 2021, you could get a lot better deals for things in mobile home park space. The sellers didn't realize what they were sitting on quite yet, like they do now. I am putting a lot more effort into the broker space with other commercial assets. We are under contract and hopefully going to purchase a 47-lot park from a wholesaler in Tennessee next month. So, kind of here and there hitting different places. But to begin with, it was strictly off market, making phone calls, figuring out who even owns the parks around, and then just making calls to them.
Right. Oh, so you guys actually cold called these folks, or did you do mail or anything like that?
We did cold calling, which is how we have gotten several parks. We have done some mailers, but never consistently enough to get anything from it. Do you guys do mostly mailers or calls?
Yeah,
We do mostly mailers.
Mostly mailers.
But on the residential, single family, small multi, it's a little bit different than buying a 50 unit asset, right?
Yeah.
It isn't. I mean, we got that 55 unit that we did over in Ohio.
You could totally I don't disagree. You can totally get it. But can you build your business on one thing in an asset class like that? I don't know. I would assume you have to have, like you're saying, broker relationships and really curating the relationship with the sellers, because they're probably old baby boomers prepping to sell.
Ideally, that's who we would like to buy from. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, if they're in their 80s, when I see a phone call coming up, I'm like, sweet, this is, I don't want to, when I see somebody my age, I'm like, they're doing exactly what I'm doing. Yeah. This one time I talked to this guy who was my age and I was confused on the phone. I was like, hey, I don't usually talk to people my own age who are really open to selling and having a real conversation about it. And he ended up, like, his dad had passed away. He got the park he didn't mean to. It was like a, kind of crazy story. But otherwise, if it's anybody under the age of like 55, I'm like, no, it's not going to work.
It's probably not going to work. Yeah.
So that brings up an interesting question I have on that. So obviously you're doing these calls. You're pretty targeted with that, I would assume. I guess, where does your basic criteria come from? Are you actually looking for criteria in the park, or are you looking at criteria for the seller? Like, and trying to find the people that are more likely to want to sell to you at a good price?
The parks, that's a much easier way to go about it. So we're looking for parks in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee. We want them to be 20 or more units. We don't want well and septic combined. I'm good with septic systems. We don't want any wastewater treatment plants. We want them to be where populations are growing, where there's some jobs around there. And so it's a lot easier in the mobile home park space to kind of figure out where all the mobile home parks are and then figure out who owns them, because I don't know their situation. I'm not going to not have somebody call them just because I can see that they're 45, right? We'll still do that. It's just unlikely it's going to work out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. No, that's cool. So then I guess as these first ones, you started to find the opportunities, you were doing this outreach. How did you know it was a good deal? Was this just you and your husband, or did you have a mentor that you were working with that was helping you out? Did you have another partner, or were you guys just going for it and, seeing what happens?
Just the two of us. So as far as underwriting and executing, it was the two of us. Now, we listened to Kevin Bupp used to have a podcast on mobile home parks back in the day. So we listened to every episode of that.
I used to listen to him a lot. He's a great guy.
Yeah, I think he has a different podcast as well on just, real estate investing in general. And for a while he had a mobile home park specific one, which was very informative. And then we actually took a course from Frank and Dave. If anybody knows mobile home parks, they know Frank and Dave. So they have the CD course. Literally, it's in CDs. I think they've upgraded it since COVID, but we bought it and listened to 18 different CDs of mobile home parks. Now, this is in 2019, which you would not expect to be listening to CDs in 2019, but here we were. Luckily, I had an older car at the time that had a CD player.
Nice. That's funny.
That was great.
Yeah. No, so that's great. So then, just confidence going into it. I love the fact that you just went into it and pulled the trigger. Right. I think that's where most people get stuck, is they're not willing to do that, right? And you even did it too, like you said, you closed on it after COVID, so you had every reason to do what everyone else did, which was not follow through. But I would imagine that it was probably a very good decision at this point that you
absolutely. It was a very good decision that has paid off in multiples. Now, I don't want it to sound like I wasn't scared. I was terrified. Sure. What I think I'm able to do, one of my strengths is being able to put logic to fear in order to move forward. So what was the worst case scenario that was going to happen to us at that time? Everybody would get laid off. They wouldn't be able to pay their rent. We would not be able to make the mortgage payment. We may have to, go through all of our savings, and, worst case, we're in our 30s, right? It's just, okay. So then we have to go get jobs. Then we have to stay at jobs longer, which I was already doing. And so when you're able to take a step back and say, first of all, I run these numbers. I ran them. I know the numbers. 50% of people have to not pay to not make the rent. It's a solid deal. And my mom was like, are you sure you want to do this right now? Of course, everyone's saying it sounds so risky, because that's what people say anytime you're getting into real estate investing. That sounds so risky. Do you remember the Great Recession? But ultimately, if you're confident in your numbers and it's the right step forward, what's the worst thing that can happen?
Yeah,
No, you're absolutely right.
That's going back. Have you ever heard of like Tim Ferriss's like fear setting
Yes.
sort of practice that he does, where you say like the worst case scenario, and then you give what the next step is after that, and then what's the worst case scenario from there, and then you do the next step. And what it allows you to do is mentally overcome a lot of like the unknown that you could face from the worst possible situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
That sounds like essentially what you did. No, that's cool. So how'd you buy that first property too? Because that's always another thing as well with commercial assets is lenders, if you don't have any experience, I mean, you didn't have like a key person that totally knew how to run and operate these deals. Did you raise money for this? Did you like have the cash for it? Did you get a bank loan? Like what was all that situation?
We sold our duplex as part of the money, is we knew we were looking for a mobile home park, and we took some money out of our retirement accounts. So we did it ourselves. We didn't want to bring in outside investors on something so new to us that was such a big leap, but we were able to have the capital from obviously having good W-2 jobs and saving up. So we took some out of our retirement.
I mean, come on, you've never been on Instagram. It's all about OPM, and you're supposed to like
money.
just max leverage and lose their money. Don't lose yours. Get it.
And we do. So we do have investors now that were several commercial deals in. Exactly.
So I have a question too on that, because you talked about doing, I think you called it the Lonnie loans to these mobile home, purchasers. So when you buy a park, do you want to buy it with homes? Because I know that also comes with its own challenges.
Okay, my preference is to have tenants own their own homes because it's more streamlined.
Right.
That being said, there are lots of things changing in the industry right now. The way that mobile home parks traditionally have been valued is different than how brokers are valuing them today, where the park-owned home rent is counting towards the net operating income and being capitalized in order to make the price work. And that is kind of how brokers are running things today. So that being said, any long-term plays that we might want to hold on to, I'm definitely would prefer the tenant-owned model. But anything, like we have this one park, it was a complete disaster that we are, turning around. It's this big project we're currently working on. That one, I don't mind keeping more of them as park-owned homes to have that additional income, because I don't plan on holding that one for very long.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Mike and I were underwriting a park, and one of the challenges, this is 2-3 years ago, one of the challenges with it was the seller owned like half the homes, and then the tenants owned like half the homes, and then getting the financing lined up and all the issues with that, because he was looking at it as, look at all this income, but then we were looking at it from a lender's perspective, which is like, yeah, that doesn't count though.
Yep.
And they didn't like the asset, and so I could see that being a challenge. And so you're saying now the way brokers are counting that towards NOI, are lenders actually also counting that as income?
Sometimes. So you have to have the right lender, and there are lenders who do a lot of mobile home parks. So one thing I would say, if you're looking at financing a mobile home park, make sure one of the first questions you ask any potential lender is if they already have a mobile home park on their books. If they don't, it's way too risky that their underwriters will not understand the asset class or feel comfortable with it, and then walk away at the last minute and you'll be stuck.
That's good. That's great advice.
That's great advice right there. That's a huge tip. Yeah. So I guess on that note too, for lenders with this, what are you looking at like local lenders primarily, or is it? Yeah,
so
okay.
Fannie and Freddie have gotten into the mobile home park game over the past decade. So they will fund some parks. They need to be like 50 plus lots and paved and in certain areas. Mostly though, it is these smaller commercial banks. So these local banks are the ones who are financing a lot of mobile home parks, just like a lot of commercial real estate in general right now, because guess what? It's going to be personally guaranteed unless you have this 50 plus lot paved community in Charlotte, North Carolina, or something like that. Then you're going to be personally guaranteeing it's going to be a local bank, and it's going to be a lot on you and your personal finances, which is part of the game. in commercial real estate until you're playing with, $10-20 million assets.
Yeah.
So true.
And
Like people are always like, don't get any recourse debt. It's like, well, if you're doing it the right way and you're growing up in the industry, you kind of have to take on some of that risk until you get that experience and you earn the stripes.
To be fair, we hear that a lot from a lot of people. I've never heard that from like not a rich old white guy that's been in the game for 30 years.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
when
I
you're
take on
starting out.
no debt. Or if you're in other people's masterminds that tell you don't ever guarantee a loan, it's like, well, I don't know how you do it then.
A lot of times that works in multifamily a little bit better because those assets are priced so expensive. It's pretty easy to go find a $10 million asset. But in mobile home parks, you're often working with $1 million, $2 million assets. And those you are going to have to personally guarantee.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's awesome. So obviously you bought this first one. What's your total portfolio look like now? Over, so in the last, 3 years, I think you've scaled up pretty quickly.
Well, we have 4 parks right now, 113 lots. We're under contract on another 47 lots right now. That's great. You know how that goes, where we've been negotiating back and forth, I feel like forever, where next week is the end of our 60-day due diligence. So one way or another, it's going to either happen or not after next week.
Nice. That's cool. And so have all those been direct to seller? And with you guys being like the just primary drivers, or have you brought in partners? I know you said you've raised a little bit of money.
Yeah. So the 4 that we own right now, those are all direct to seller. We had another 2 that we ended up assigning to other investors. So those were also direct to sellers. The one we're working on right now was a wholesaler that brought it to us. So, we're kind of going in that direction. We do have a partner on one small park where we just went 50-50 in it. And then on our last park that we bought, that's the project one where we're doing a big turnaround, we did our first syndication last year. So we do have investors in on that one, and we'll bring investors in going forward.
Right on. Nice. That's great. I love that. Like just keeping it simple, and you maintaining most of the ownership like that as well. I mean, that's where real wealth is made. That's always kind of the thing that drives me crazy with just the state of real estate right now is you have all these people that are like, I own 130 doors. It's like, yeah, but you're an LP in like a fund that like bought a bunch of stuff. Like you don't actually own anything. You have like a tiny fraction of an already watered down tiny fraction of what you invested in.
Yeah, it's easy to get in. Like that is one of the things when you get into the circles of commercial real estate, it's like, oh, well, I have 100 million assets under management. And I have, it's just such like it's a little bit ridiculous. But if you just have conversations with actual individuals who are doing stuff, you can kind of get away from showing off then.
Yeah, it's way more impressive to meet somebody that's like, I own 150 doors than somebody that says, I'm a syndicator with 100 million under management. Like somebody that actually owns the doors outright. Like you're like, damn, that is like legit.
Yeah, but it's all about marketing, right? You got to get like the normies who are trying to get their money. You got to make them think that you're a big deal. So, but no, that's awesome. So I guess going forward, are you planning to stick with mobile home parks, or are you starting to look at some other stuff?
I love mobile home parks. We will keep buying those for sure. I also like other commercial assets. I like the ease of management. One thing we really like about mobile home parks is value add opportunities. We are value add investors, and those opportunities exist as well in the non-residential commercial space. And there's not as much competition in that space because there's no game plan of here's exactly what you do. Every asset is different and it's more challenging that way. So I've been looking at a lot of strip centers, flex spaces, some industrial buildings, some kind of small offices, not the office parks that are kind of loss leaders right now in our environment, but sort of retail / office spaces where you can put a hair salon or CPA firm, those sort of things.
How do you, okay, so this is the second time you're really kind of in your career going from one asset class to the next. Like how do you spin that up? Like what are you doing when you say I'm looking at that? What is that first thing you started doing to get prepared to buy something in that area?
Yeah, so I joined a mastermind with OSH Patel, he is one of Joe Fairless's podcasters on the Best Ever podcast, right? So he has a ton of commercial experience. He knows what he's doing. And so I'm in their mastermind. So for instance, there's this one deal that I'm working on this week, getting under contract. It's in or outside of Atlanta. So I called his business partner, Rinku, and I was like, hey, let's go in on this together. You're the local one here. I'm not in Atlanta. And so being able to just have an instant phone call to look at my underwriting, an entire group of very experienced investors, we meet every Tuesday. So, putting money into stuff like that and the knowledge for me is well worth it right now.
Yeah. I love it. So your whole formula for how you've gotten where you're at is invest in education, invest in your network, take action. Like it really is that simple.
It does sound simple.
Yeah.
You have, I mean, it is that simple though, honestly. Like if you look at its core level, and you chose to take action on mobile home parks, and actually take action on commercial stuff. You're finding the people that know how to do it to pay for speed so you can learn to do it faster and learn to do it more efficiently. I'm sure in those you have a network of people as well that are like-minded, that are helping you make decisions faster, learn faster. You learn from their mistakes. They can encourage you and keep you accountable to what you're doing. And then you're doing the small, boring stuff to take action over and over and over again. And, I feel like most people, they never get anywhere because they don't do any of those steps, right? They're like, I'm just going to watch more YouTube videos, consume more podcasts, read more books, but I'm never actually going to do anything that drives and propels me forward. And
that's true. Yeah. And a lot of times it's connection. Like nobody wants to make phone calls. I dread it, truthfully. Even when I see a seller call that somebody set up for me on my calendar, I'm like, oh, okay, I have to pick up the phone and I have to call somebody, and I have on my calendar every week. I have to follow up, and then I have to call brokers. And I'm like, okay, but you're right. That's part of the game. And it's those small things that you just have to do because that's what your business requires, or else you're not going to have a business. You just have to make sure that happens every week.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not overly complicated. You just have to recognize that other people are doing it so you can do it, and be willing to, like what Mike was just saying, be willing to pay to get there faster.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Awesome. Well, that's great stuff, Amanda. I love just like the trajectory that you've gone. It's so repeatable. It's very, very impressive, like how you've done it in such a short period of time. And it's, it just comes down to good old fashioned hard work, which I'm always a sucker for. So
thank you.
That's good stuff. Awesome. So we're going to dive into the last few questions of our show here. The first one, and I'm hypothesizing that you might have some good stories from your asset class, but what is the craziest real estate investing story that you have? This can be a big win, a big loss, anything in between.
Crazy tenants.
Yeah. I would love to share a big win, but I feel like people probably always share those. So I will share something that happened to us that is just terrible. So when we were doing the individual mobile homes, right, we had at the time, like 3-month-old son in the back of the car. And here, my husband and I, I'm on maternity leave. My husband and I are going out to look at this mobile home. We had it already agreed on the price. We were buying it on a Friday with the intention of selling it on Sunday. Great. We go out, we buy it Friday. Saturday, we're out there. We had already contacted somebody to come rip all the carpet out because the carpet looked terrible. We wanted to do that before we sold it. The guy comes on Saturday. He rips it all out. I go in afterwards just to check and make sure everything's good. I walk back out and I get into my car with my son in the back, my infant son. And these little black bugs are jumping off of my ankles. The house was infested with fleas. There were fleas jumping off of my ankles. And I wore like sandals. I didn't know any better. I'm such an idiot. So then, of course, we were like freaking out about that. And we had to like have the car in heat. It was the middle of the summer, luckily. So they ended up dying over the next few days. And as far as I know, my son never got a flea bite or anything like that. But I felt worse for the guy who actually took out all the carpet because we just found him on Craigslist. He shoved it all into his car and he was driving off with it. And so that poor guy, I'm sure, had like so many flea bites from that.
Probably out wearing a flea collar after that.
Right.
That's bad.
Yeah, it's funny. That's something that we don't really deal with up here in the Northwest, but we have friends that are down in your area, and that seems to be a really common thing throughout like the Southeast, or like we have a friend in Texas who finds fleas all the time.
Fleas and termites. We don't really have those problems.
Termites.
We've had that too. Yeah, termites.
Yeah, we don't have any.
We don't have any scary bugs or animals up here, really. Like, we're pretty chill in Washington. Down south, you get some big spiders, snakes,
True.
gators.
We have gators. Yeah, we have bears. But if you have a house with like a bear problem, that's just kind of cool.
Yeah,
honestly.
right. Yeah, just make your door stronger.
You guys just have frozen pipes and stuff like that.
Yeah,
that
we
also
do
is
have
scary.
That's true. We have a lot of that. That's for sure. Awesome. Well, I'm glad you got out of that one unscathed. Okay, cool. Next question. What is the number one tip you would have for either a new investor looking to get started or a small time investor looking to take their business to the next level?
It's hard. I mean, it's not easy. It's hard right now. It was hard years ago. Since 2018, 2019, everyone was talking about how real estate was overpriced. Yeah, well, it's only gotten more so, and it's not going back really. It's hard right now because prices are dropping and sellers don't want to acknowledge that. So there are less deals right now. But it only takes one. It only takes one really good deal to change your life. It's not going to be your first one, but you have to get there. You have to get to that one that's going to change your life. And so just keeping on with it, it is possible. Just go for it every day.
I'm glad you recognize
So it sounds like
that's hard.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying is people need to be consistent with what they're doing and just do that for like the long term.
Put the effort in. Be willing to put the effort in longer than you
have
think
to put
you
that
need
effort
to.
in. Yeah.
Yeah. I was leaning into that because we always joke that like all the real A players that come on here, the tip they always give is about consistency in some
shape or form. Yeah, it really is. Yeah. Consistency over time.
That's how we know that someone's actually walking the walk is when that's their tip versus if they have something about like, you need to, I don't know, some way to like make it happen faster or whatever. It's like everyone that's actually playing the game knows that that's not how it works.
Yeah. You never know when it's going to be the home run.
Totally.
Exactly. That's a very good point as well. Awesome. All right. Last question, Amanda. Where can people find you, follow you, and reach out to you if you'd like me to do so?
Yeah, my website is voyageinvesting.com. If you're interested in getting on our newsletter and seeing the offers that we have come out, you can join our investor circle there. I also post a lot on LinkedIn, Amanda Cruz, and on Instagram, it's at Investing with Amanda.
Nice. Perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks, Amanda. I really appreciate you coming on the show. And you guys, you should definitely reach out to Amanda. I mean, if you didn't hear this and think like she's crushing it, I want to do what she's doing. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. She is an absolute inspiration, and I'm sure she would be happy to chat with you about kind of the stuff that she's worked on and the stuff that she is working on too, and probably has some great knowledge that she'd be willing to share with you.
Absolutely.
So absolutely reach out to her, guys. And thanks for listening, everybody. If you could please share the show with anybody who might find interesting at all. And I mean, I don't know how anyone could not find this interesting if they have any interest in changing their life through real estate cash flow or building wealth. So please share this with everyone that you know and go to collectingkeyspodcast.com/free. Get your free 5-step guide for generating off-market leads. And here's a secret as well. It doesn't have to just be for residential properties like Dan and I do. You can use the tactics in our ebook to get mobile home parks, just like Amanda Cruz does on a very regular basis. So thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll talk to you all next week.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks.